So I wound up here after undergrad. I had an internship actually in this department, the education department with Jean Mariocourt. And then I went to graduate school and came back and started at the Museum and Archives. So I was with the Heritage Society until just this year. Oh. All right, well, it's about time. So if that's all right with you two and you're ready to go, then I'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our virtual Chautauqua lecture series. My name is Dakota Harkins, and I'm the Director of Education and Heritage Programming here at Lakeside Chautauqua. Today, we're going to be kicking off our theme on Lake Erie Shores and Islands, focusing on tourism in the region. But before we get started, one quick reminder. Now we are showing our webinars on Zoom and Facebook, and we'll be fielding questions on both of those platforms. But make sure that if you do have any questions throughout the program, I'll be moderating those through the Q&A window that's on the Zoom webinar. So if you're attending today via Zoom, make sure that you click on the Q&A at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions there. And if you're on Facebook, we can take questions in the comments section. We'll be saving those to the end of the program today. So the last 15 minutes or so, we'll be asking all of our question and answer sessions. Throughout the season, if you are having any trouble attending any programs or you have questions about the calendar, please feel free to contact me at dharkins@lakesiohio.com and we'll make sure to get you connected with all of our education series. So with that, I'd like to welcome our two guests today. Marie and John Hildebrandt are joining us to tell us more about the 150 years of tourism in the Lake Erie region. John is currently the president of the Erie County Historical Society, and prior to that, he spent 40 years, was it? As the
40 years, a long time.
40 years at Cedar Point. And Marie has previously been Perkins Township trustee and was also a chairperson of the Erie Regional Planning Commission. And she currently writes a few articles, a few columns on gardening. So they both co-wrote a book called Lake Erie Shores and Islands in 2015. And today they're going to tell us a little bit more about the history of the area. So welcome, John and Marie. We're so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you, Dakota. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful summer day. This is as nice as it gets on the North Coast, I guess. Maybe a touch warm, but it's not January. It's supposed to be warm in the summertime.
Right. It's not snowing now, so we're happy with that. Well, I will turn my screen off now if you'd like to fire up your program and we'll get started.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, we thought we'd start out with something kind of fun. Ask some questions, test people's knowledge of tourism in the area. And I know this can't be interactive, but you can keep track on your own and see how you do. And the first question is, what is this building? And who is the man seated in the first row with the white collar?
Excuse me, John, your PowerPoint didn't come up. So if you want to try resharing that one again and clicking the PowerPoint screen. There we go.
Okay, well, I've already given away the answer. But back up for just one step here. I thought we'd begin with, I'll back up and start at the beginning. I thought we'd have a little fun to begin and ask some questions to see how knowledgeable folks are about tourism in the area over the last 150 years. So the first question is, what is this building and who is the man seated in the first row with the white collar? And a hint, the structure is still in use today. And this shouldn't be too difficult for Lakesiders. That's Hotel Lakeside, which opened in 1875. And the gentleman there in the white collar is President Rutherford B. Hayes. He came to Lakeside quite often, and usually the situation involved a reunion, a military reunion from the Civil War. He was a decorated veteran, and the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry often had events at Lakeside. Two, what year did Jungle Larry's African Safari open at Cedar Point? If you're a Cedar Point fan at all and grew up in Northeastern Ohio, you know about Jungle Larry. He was a regular on Captain Penny's TV show, and we all got a big thrill out of the animals he would bring to the show. But here's the hint. It's the same year My Fair Lady won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Wooly Bully was the best-selling single. 1965, which is also the year that Cedar Point built the Space Spiral, which was an iconic ride at Cedar Point for many, many years. Number three, what is the name of this restaurant? When did it open? It was a very well-known restaurant in the Huron area, and it's located on a river. Should be an easy one too. The Showboat, which opened in 1971. Four, did Frank Sinatra ever perform in Cedar Point's Ballroom? A question we get asked actually quite a bit in my Cedar Point days, because big band era was in full display at Cedar Point up in the Ballroom. All the big bands were there. A lot of people assume Frank was too. But we're not sure. There's no confirming evidence one way or another. So in absence of positive confirmation, as historians, we have to assume he did not perform in the Ballroom at Cedar Point. However, it's a good story. We wish he had, and maybe he did. We'll see how it goes. Somebody can unearth some evidence that changes our thinking. I hope so. What year did the Marblehead Lighthouse open? Right next door to Lakeside. What was the name of the first lighthouse keeper? A couple of hints. President Ulysses S. Grant and Rutherford B. Hayes were also born in the same year, this year. And the first keeper was a Revolutionary War veteran. And so the year was 1822. And the veteran's name was Benajah Wolcott, Benjamin Wolcott. Approximately how many how many hotel rooms are there in Erie and Ottawa County? We know there are a lot. All of us who have spent any time here know there, especially in the last 20 or 30 years, hotels and motels have popped up everywhere. There's a picture of the Hotel Breakers, which has been here a long time, but recently refurbished, and Bayshore over Put-in Bay. But the answer is 8,000 hotel or motel rooms in Erie and Ottawa counties. Quite a few. I think you would agree. 7, what is the average yearly attendance at Perry's Victory and Peace International Peace Memorial over at Put-in Bay? How many folks go there on an average year? And what year was it dedicated? And which is taller, Perry's Monument or the Statue of Liberty in New York? The answer: for the past 5 years, Perry's Monument and Peace Memorial has averaged about 200,000 visitors per year. Quite a few, I would say. And it was formally dedicated July 31st, 1931. And Perry's Monument is 12 foot taller than the torch on Lady Liberty. So pretty close in height, but Perry gets the edge. This is Put-in Bay Harbor from Perry's Monument from the top. You see Gibraltar Island in the middle ground, and in the distance is Rattlesnake Island. And if you were in New York City, this is what you would see from Statue of Liberty. Quite a different view. Name any 5 steamers that provided transportation to Cedar Point and Sandusky in the Lake Erie Islands, including Lakeside, Marblehead between 1860 and 1920. This was sort of the golden age for lake steamers. And they traveled all over Western Lake Erie delivering passengers in the summer months. This picture was taken in Put-in-Bay Harbor. Shows Gibraltar Island in the background there. It's taken in 1880. So anybody you can scribble down your 5 names. And they need to include one of these: the G.A. Beckling, the Arrow, R.B. Hayes, J. Cooke, Chippewa, Put-in-Bay, Eastland, Chief Justice Waite, the Whirly, the Messenger, Good Time, State of Ohio, Pearl, J.B. Lutz, lots of fine steamers. I just throw in a couple of pictures of the most famous ones. The Put-in-Bay, probably the best known. This is on the Detroit River about 1925, I believe. And notice it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 decks. It had quite a passenger load. It was really decked out beautifully and a sight to see. And you'll notice, certainly, you can't help but notice all that black smoke pouring out of the stack. It was, these ships were wood-fired or coal-fired, and they produced a lot of smoke and would not be acceptable today, of course. We've come a long way. There's the Chippewa, another famous steamer. It has beautiful lines, I think, taken in 1923. Again, you can see that black soot. The lake was covered with it in the western part of the lake in the summertime, certainly. What percentage of visitors to our area stay at least one night as part of their visit? People are usually surprised by this. Over 2/3 stay overnight. Campground, on a boat in a marina, at a cottage or cabin, hotel, motel. And that percentage has been increasing over the last 20 to 30 years for sure. And 10, which of the following entertainers has performed at Cedar Point? The Byrds, Fats Domino, Brenda Lee, Al Hurt, or the Four Seasons? Actually, I can vouch for the Byrds because I saw them perform here when I was in high school back in the mid-60s at Cedar Point, and it was quite the thing, I'll tell you. Well, the answer is they all did at one time or another. Cedar Point's had a long tradition of having top entertainers over the years, and these were four headline acts at various times. So tourism, we're talking about tourism, and tourism is kind of one of those words that's broad-based. Are you a tourist if you're going to see Uncle Ralph in Pittsburgh overnight? Certainly a tourist if you're going to Orlando, but we tend to take a broad vision. It's cruise ships, it's vacations, it's trips for pleasure, it's group travel. It covers a lot of bases. It's a big force in our economy. We define tourism, and I say we, I'm talking about the Ohio Travel Association and the National Trade Associations. It's traveling 50 miles or more one way for leisure or business. So even though you may not view going to see Uncle Ralph in Pittsburgh as leisure time or vacation time, you really do fall into the category of travel and tourism, especially travel. And this map, we're located, as we all know, right about there on the edge of Western Lake Erie. This map kind of shows the basic market area of where our tourism comes from, basically Western New York, Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, most of Kentucky, Indiana, the northern part of Illinois, not really Wisconsin so much, but all of Michigan. Michigan are often frequent travelers to our area for the islands and for Cedar Point. And what is the Lake Erie West region? Getting it a little more specifically. And I think that it's Our concept is subjective, of course. Some people could argue one way or another, but it generally begins, we think, in Vermilion and west along the lakeshore to Port Clinton, south to Fremont, and over to Milan and Norwalk. And that area, of course, including the islands and Sandusky Bay and Lake Erie, is the Lake Erie West region, or the lake, we call it Lake Erie land, shores and islands, what have you. It feels different. It is different. Tourism becomes a big draw in those areas. I know as kids coming in from Cleveland to this area, as soon as we cross the bridge over the Vermilion River, you can see McGarvey's on the right side there. Yeah, everything changed. You were in the part of the state that was more about tourism or more about vacationing than any other. And, we searched hard and long when we worked on our book together to come up with a map that would show the relationship of places so people would understand, but yes, this is Put-in-Bay. Well, how far is that to Cedar Point? How far west does Sandusky Bay go? We talk about that. It's important to put structure to it, and this was ours. We found this in a boating magazine from Ohio Boating, June of 1959. And I think it communicates pretty well with what that area is. Tourism has been very, very good for Ohio business. It doesn't often get the limelight, but it's very, very important, becoming more important. And we talk about tourism, people and states. People think about New York City, New York, they think about California, they think about Texas or Florida. But Ohio does it very, very well. Travel economy is growing, especially this chart shows, it's really growing fast on the accommodation side, hotels and motel revenue over the years, although this year has had some particular challenges with the pandemic. We'll touch on that in a moment, but the basic trend line has been very positive. Travel supports jobs all over Ohio, in restaurants, in campgrounds, marinas, amusement parks, all over. Over 400,000 Ohio jobs are sustained by the travel and tourism industry in Ohio. A very impressive number. That's nearly 9% of all jobs in the state. Those dollars support businesses that hire Ohioans, again, all across the state. And it generates tax revenue, big time tax revenue. In fact, $3.4 billion in state and local taxes from the travel and tourism industry. $3.4 billion. Then the local economic impact of tourism. I'm going to turn over to Marie now, who's going to jump in a little bit on the economics.
Where once Erie and Ottawa County were heavily invested in manufacturing, gradually, and it became more of a tour as manufacturers left the area. It became there was more of an emphasis on tourism. The cleaning up of Lake Erie, the prominence of Cedar Point, the popularity of the Erie Islands really changed the whole scenery for this area. Today we have 1 million visitors. Well, maybe last year, not this year. We had 1 million visitors, 11 million visitors to the area. Where basically now there are more service industry jobs than any other kinds of jobs in Erie County and in Ottawa County as well. with approximately 14,000 people employed in the tourism industry, has a major impact on our area. The wages are $357 million in 2017. That's gone up sizably as the years have gone on. And it generates $225 million in taxes. That includes $53 million in taxes for Erie and Ottawa counties. This year, unfortunately, we were bowled over by the pandemic. It's caused restaurants, it's caused hotels, it's caused Cedar Point, it's caused the islands to shut down for extended periods of time. Popularly, it's called the Black Swan event, and it has had a major impact on our area. Local governments have come to depend on the taxes generated through tourism. In fact, in Sandusky, the city of Sandusky alone, about a third of the taxes generated to operate the city of Sandusky are funded through things like hotel motel tax, sales tax, real estate tax, admissions tax. It's a devastating year for all our local communities, and it's one that will have far-reaching effects. If we're lucky, the local governments will recover in 2021, but I suspect it will take longer than that. It even affects Erie Shores and Islands, the Visitor and Convention Bureaus, because they depend heavily on the bed tax to promote our area.
I mean, Cedar Point is going to be closed for 50 days out of where it normally would be open. The opening day for Cedar Point for this year is going to be tomorrow, July 9th. So that it's difficult, really impossible to make up all that lost attendance. So it's going to be a real challenge for the park and for the industry, and as has been well documented. We talked about that. So this was our book, Lake Erie Shores and Islands, which traces the history of tourism in the area. It's an Arcadia book, which specializes in the local stories and by using vintage photographs. And we had a great experience locating information and locating photographs for the book. We're going to talk a little bit more about the cover shot later, because it really has some very interesting facts about that. Arcadia books have been very popular in the area. These mini history books. Cedar Point had one written by David Francis back in 2004. Sandusky's has a book out, Castelia, Cold Creek, and the Blue Hole, and several other communities in our tourism area have Arcadia books. Two that have not been touched. The city of Vermilion is crying out for an author, as is the city of Huron, I think, as well. So there's an opportunity there, somebody. Now, over 150 years, tourism has really told an interesting story. We looked at the lakeside photograph up there on the left before. On the right is some of the J. Cooke family at Put-in-Bay. Back in the 1880s, 1890s, we'll touch more on that in a moment. The Jet Express, which transformed the economics in the islands over the last 20, 25 years, much like the lake steamers did in their era. The Cedar Point Beach, I always love this picture. It looks like a lot of fun, and it looks like pretty hard to do to get up that high and that bounce. And two pictures which I think really kind of sum it all up, with the variety and the changes over the course of history. On the left there is the Cooke family having a picnic dinner or picnic lunch on Green Island about 1890. Green Island's located just off South Bass, just to the west of it. And the Cookes, of course, J. Cooke was a Civil War financier who owned Gibraltar Island and his family had extended visits to the island, and they often would go on picnics. And one of the things, in fact, Maria and I learned doing research was that picnics were a very, very big deal in the late 19th century and early 20th century. They involved not just one meal, but 2 or 3 meals in the entire day. And people would haul all sorts of silver service and cutlery and plates and a variety of enormous quantities of food and camp out all day long and just enjoy one another's company and eat. That was a big activity. And on the right-hand side there is the Millennium Forest. That's the view from the top. You can see the lake and the islands in the background. A 10-year-old boy there seems pretty impressed with it all. And I can vouch for the fact that it is quite a view from there, but it took me at least 15 or 20 rides so I could, hold myself together enough up at the top to enjoy the view, because it's a pretty unique experience riding in Millennium Forest. Hopefully some of you are Millennium Forest riders out there. And again, we defined the area. We thought it was important for the reader. A lot of readers would not necessarily assume the proximity to certain other areas in the islands and Cedar Point and what have you. And this really helps lay it all out. Lake Erie is the key to understanding the history of tourism in the area. It is our heart and soul. Lake Erie touches everything. There are a lot of other places to have theme parks than on the shores of Lake Erie, but Lake Erie gives Cedar Point, for example, a unique perspective, a unique piece of geography, a big part of its appeal for many, many years. And as is, Lakeside is Lakeside because it's by the lake, Put-in Bay, what have you. Summer and winter, Lake Erie is sort of our destiny, and we're proud of it. We took the history of the 150 years and divided it up into 7 different chapters, which kind of describe some of the unique things going on in a certain period of time. It's subjective. This is our view. Somebody could easily come up with some different ones. But the first kind of era or chapter we call the Gilded Age discovers Lake Erie from 1860 to about 1890. You had Put-in Bay was a prominent operation back then, more so than Cedar Point. Lots of hotels, lots of people visiting wineries and the scenery. There's the Beebe House Hotel in the from the 1860s over Put-in Bay. Fortunately, it burned to the ground. So right there is a great picture of some of the Cooke family boys jumping off the boat near Gibraltar Island in the summer of 1889. Here's Put-in Bay Harbor, 1889. This was taken obviously from Gibraltar Island, looking east basically. That's the steamer Pearl, tied up on the waterfront. There's a little smoke there. She's probably getting ready to make way. In the distance, if you look on the far end of the horizon, that would be Marblehead, and probably Lakeside is about there. There's Cedar Point Boardwalk in the 1880s. The large building on the left with the cupola is the Grand Pavilion. It was built in 1888. First big, large structure at Cedar Point. And it's somewhat miraculously, it still exists and it's still in use, actually. It looks quite different nowadays, but it has been in a continuous operation since 1888. The only building that's older, which is technically not part of Cedar Point, was the Coast Guard station at the tip of the peninsula. We've never included that in comparisons. But as you can see, the boardwalk is very popular. The cupola in the back housed bandstand where a lot of local bands performed. And as you can see, people are kind of dressed up. Going to the amusement park was a big deal. You wore your Sunday best. Another shot. The second chapter, or we call it, Lake Erie's first golden age, from early 1890s to about 1910, leading up to the First World War. Cedar Point expanded greatly. That's when George Becklin came into the fore at the park and purchased it. And he built the hotel breakers, built the Coliseum, put in the first electric-powered midway, brought in more roller coasters, increased promotion and advertising dramatically. You had the Hotel Victory built over Put Bay, which for a time was the largest seasonal hotel in the world. Steamers were doing their thing out there on the lake, taking people from Detroit and Cleveland out here to visit and relax and vacation. Economy was good. Things were humming. Entertainment, I mentioned earlier, this is the Great Western Band, which performed at Cedar Point and other locations as well. It was a local band, but did very, very well. And this type of entertainment, local bands were very, very popular. And this was the era of John Philip Sousa, and of course, and people really thrived to that type of entertainment. One of my favorite beach shots from about 1905, 1910. At first, when you look at this image, you think, are they sitting or are they standing? You can't really tell for sure, but they look like they're having a good time. And obviously, it's a pose shot. Unique bathing suits, of course. In the background, I point out the sea swing in the back off the shore of the beach, which was a novel attraction for many years to Cedar Point on the beach. And you can get a feel for how wide the beach was and how deep it was in terms of the structure. You'd walk out 100 yards or more and still only be up to your knees. There's the Hotel Victory on the right. Quite a place. Kelly's on the winery. This was the era when the winery was going strong. Wineries drew a lot of people to the area. And here's a Kelly's Island tour bus. And we use that as a good image for World War I era in the 1920s. But basically, there wasn't a lot of big new development like there had been in the last 20 or 30 years prior. But everything held its own. The years were good in the 20s, and it's reflected here. This is the waitstaff outside the Rathskeller at Cedar Point by the Coliseum. You can tell they're a dapper crowd, and one of George Beckling, the owner, was really wanted to upgrade food and beverage service at Cedar Point, and he hired a lot of chefs from big hotels in Cleveland to come out and work the summer, and put the wait staff in bow ties and looks like tuxedos, and they were mostly college students. Always got a kick out of the guy in the back here in the background with his tie, looking out the window at the photographer. And this was the jumping horse thing, very popular on the East Coast, came out to the West Coast as well, and in the Midwest. And it was actually, this was taken at Put Bay, and obviously it would never be allowed today, but it was part of the repertoire of activities and entertainment from really teens through the 1920s. In 1914, the Cedar Point Chaussee opened, a brainchild of George Beckling. He kind of saw the handwriting on the wall that automobiles were going to become more and more popular. We needed to get good automobile access to Cedar Point beyond the lake steamers. And he put up the money to do it, and it became very successful. And it was a good thing he did. Automobile was changing the vacation habits of Americans at this point. More and more people had cars, less dependent on trains, and less dependent on lake steamers, for example, to move folks around. And that trend has continued. Chapter 4, we call it Surviving the Depression in the War Years, basically from the early 30s up until about 1950. Cedar Point was in the doldrums, as were, I think, just about every other area in the Lake Erie region. You just try to hang on as best you could. This image is from Vermilion on the lake, a lakeshore community just east of Vermilion. Dates from the mid 1930s. Actually, the Vermilion on the lake is still very much alive, and that building still exists, and so they hold special events there for people who belong to the association. Beautiful building. So Cedar Point Midway in 1940, 41, I believe. One of the things I point out in the far back there, and if you look up to your left, you can see the word cyclone. Which the Cyclone was a famous wooden roller coaster. We'll touch a little bit more on that in a minute, but it was like the big calling card for thrill rides from the late 20s through the 30s and 40s. And again, here's the Cedar Point Ballroom, which was very, very popular in the late 30s and through the 40s. With big bands, you know, Guy Lombardo, Stan Kenton, Dorsey Brothers, they all played there. It's a magnificent structure. It's a unique room. If you ever have an opportunity, it's something well worth seeing. You really do feel transported back. The original floor, the original Art Deco work is on display, and it's just an amazing, amazing place. I was general manager of Cedar Point. In fact, one of my back door out of my office, you walk right out into the ballroom. It was great. Here's the main midway along the lake. Again, in the 1930s. There's the Cyclone at the top. You can see the sign right there. You'll notice American flags here, American flags at the top, American flags along the beach. Cedar Point's always been associated with showing the flag a great deal. It's built into the structure of many, many elements at the park, just sort of an interesting sidebar. And again, the Cyclone, a terrifying ride, but that's what makes it a great thrill ride. I wish I could have ridden it. Cedar Point continued to be popular for outings. This is the group from Sandusky, the Hind and Dow company, having their outing at Putin Bay. And in the background there is Ballast Island, I believe. And of course, there's Kelly's Island and some superb fishing grounds has always been popular. Here, that's a Lake Erie sturgeon. It was caught in the spring of, they're claiming the largest fish ever caught in the lake. We can't say that, but it was caught like in 1937. Chapter 5, we call it Postwar Recovery and Baby Boom. You know, after the war ended, prosperity started to rule, and the 50s were very good for the economy, for the country. Baby boom families, the highway system had improved. They had more leisure time, more money to do things like buy Lyman boats, which was, of course, the calling card for all, Lake Erie boats at that period, very popular in the 50s and 60s. Cedar Point Causeway was opened. And here's the evolution from lake freighters to a much smaller, more nimble, more easier to operate craft that really carried the bulk of the effort during the 50s and 60s and 70s up until we got to the period of the Jet Express. The era when the motels became very popular, car trips. This is the Rancho Pillow on Sandusky, which of course depended a lot on Cedar Point. And Cedar Point had its big revitalization, starting in the 50s and 60s with Emil LaGrosse and George Roos, who bought the property and began to convert it into an Ohio Disneyland, and did so beautifully and very effectively, and a huge difference. They're legends actually within the amusement park industry. The Wild Mouse there was the first roller coaster I ever rode, and scared me to no end. Thought for sure I was going to go flying into outer space off that track. My brother and I just never let go of that bar, I'll tell you that. It was a great ride. It still exists in various forms around the world, actually, the Wild Mouse stuff. And that's Jackie Mayer, Miss Ohio, who went on to become Miss America on Cedar Point Beach, which made still popular. Chapter 6 we call Lake Erie Renaissance from 1970 to about 1990s, when Lake Erie was kind of reborn. We had the walleye return and the condo revolution, whatever you want to call it. And it suddenly popped up everywhere. Two of our big advertising campaigns that year, I think we can relate to that. There's a Cedar Point. Your dad's been good. Bring them to Cedar Point. Very popular. And put an island in your life. The Put-in-Bay line for many, many years in the 80s. A very effective, I think, presentation. Chapter 6, again, it shows the building of Route 2 on the left, which made better transportation easier to access from Cleveland and points east into the area. And of course, the great boom in the walleye. Chapter 7, roller coasters, water parks, and Jet Express, starting early 90s through current times. It was really a second golden age. Jet Express made a big difference in being able to get globs of people over at Put-in-Bay quickly and often, and really generated more opportunity for lots of other spin-off businesses. Water parks, the indoor water park revolution came to Sandusky, a big year-round attraction. And of course, roller coasters. Cedar Point was in the expansion mode to using roller coasters as a strategy to bring people from further away and have more of a national footprint. That certainly did the trick. You can see more freighters, and of course, the golf carts over at Put-in-Bay, and Kelly's for that matter too. Indoor water park, that's Kalahari. Of course, we joke it's the 8th wonder of the world. It's just an immense structure, and has done a lot for tourism in the off season. And in the last 10 or 15 years, we've had new museums which have helped the tourism area. The Sandusky Maritime Museum, Carousel Museum, and the Aviation Museum. All great assets to our area and to our tourism message. Of course, Cedar Point and the roller coasters, there's Millennium Force and Top Thrill Dragster. Things really have evolved around two main core elements, I would guess, looking over the 150 years. If you pick any decade, the 1-2 draw is Cedar Point and Put-in-Bay. Between the two of them, they really dominate. And most, not all certainly, but many other businesses and events and everything else revolve around those two major destinations. Mentioned J. Cooke family at Gibraltar Island. J. Cooke was born in Sandusky. The man really who financed the Union War effort in terms of selling bonds to raise money to put the boys in blue in the field. A remarkable achievement, and he was wealthy before, and he became even wealthier after. And he loved the area, loved hunting fish here. He liked Gibraltar. He purchased it during the Civil War. His brother supervised the construction. And he and his family, extended family, spent every summer there, usually lived mainly in Philadelphia, would come out in June and then in September for most of the next 30 or 40 years. This is J. Cooke as he appeared in the Civil War era. But it's sort of Gilded Age tourism for the 1%. And there's some unique insights there we'd like to share with you. Again, that's Gibraltar Island. If you look just to your right about where the cursor is here, you'll see that the top of a turreted tower. And that's where the castle was, but he owned the whole island. And it's quite a beautiful spot. Here's a side view. This is a view from the top of the castle, the turret out toward the east, toward the monument and the harbor. One of Jay Cooke's sons, Henry Cooke, who went on to become a minister, was also an amateur photographer. He took about 2,000 or more images, which are housed at the Hayes Museum Presidential Center. It's a remarkable collection. He was very good. He documented the family activities and the visitors they had and what have you over a period from about 1870, 1880 up until well into the early years of the 20th century. The exterior of the castle has been largely restored through Ohio State University, which now owns all the properties where they operate Stone Laboratory. This is the interior of the library. The next on the list, I think, for restoration. There's another shot of the exterior. Beautiful spot. There's the Cooke family having dining over at in Put-in-Bay or somewhere on the island, and they're right doing sewing an American flag together. In the background, you can see through the portice there is a little monument that was the first monument to Perry's victory that was built, and near there it was supposedly the spot where one of Perry's sailors could see the tops of the rigging of the British ships coming off the horizon, to give them the signal to sail out and give battle. Great shot on the left. A young man or young boy, actually, probably out on the yard arm like that. I'm sure his mother wouldn't approve of that location. But these are documented. He took these images to document their life. And it does give a unique insight into that Gilded Age mentality for the folks at the high end of the wage income, or wealth income, rather. Bicycling was very popular in the 1880s, 1890s, turn of the century. And this is more of the Cooke family on an extended visit to Put-in-Bay. And there's the Cooke grandchildren, I believe, getting ready to jump off into the lake. Another shot of Hotel Victory. In the inside there, the interior, there was the ice cream parlor. Again, that's Cooke family folks enjoying that. They are at the top of the tower waving flags or towels or something, but evidently having a grand time. Water toboggans. You look at this picture, you see that great water toboggan out there. Very popular for many years, from the late 1890s through early, almost to the 1930s. They look like a lot of fun. Looks like they would have been rough in Lake Erie in the wintertime with ice and such. This is a very interesting photograph. It's been reproduced a lot. We found it in the Sandusky Library archives. We found it in the Hayes Presidential Center archives, several other places. I've always been intrigued by the gentleman there in the hat. It looks like a grandson, just taking it all in. And there's these two boys staring at that piece of driftwood. What mischief can we get into with that? And there's a roller coaster up in the background. It kind of says it all. But everybody had water toboggans, very popular, or water slides. This was at Ruggles Beach, small amusement park. Amusement park's probably stretching it, but Ruggles Beach over near Huron. You can see that this guy's actually coming right down the slide. Looks like a lot of fun. This one is at Crystal Beach over by Vermilion. Again, here's the route of the water toboggan down. This is a unique one. This is over at Put-in-Bay. This had to be taken from either the monument, probably, or an airplane. I'm guessing it was the monument, looking back east. Very interesting image. This was at Deisler's Beach at Put-in-Bay. You can see in this picture, there's a pipe that goes up here and there's a little smoke at the top. There was a steam-powered mechanism for helping to haul the sleds up to the top before they could slide down. There's some people splashing in the water there. And it looks like fun, a little bit of work too. Just another view that shows a little bit more of the facility and folks out on the water. Marie, tell us about this picture.
Arcadia Publishing series Images of America traces the history of different regions of the country. One of the first requirements is to find a cover for the book that's being published. In our mind, we wanted to try and find one that said it all. And Lake Erie is probably the most important part of tourism, and the people who populate the area, because we are on Lake Erie, are crucial to any story that we tell about the history of tourism. We went through thousands and thousands and thousands of photos. And this one kind of gave us an aha moment because it shows the water, it shows people, and it's obviously staged, but it shows people enjoying the summer and enjoying the water and just being free and carefree. The interesting part about this photograph is that it's taken from the water looking at the shoreline. Most photographs you see today are taken from the beach or the shoreline and looking out at the water. And this was the reverse. We thought it was really a unique photo and one that said a lot about what tourism is and what it means to all of us. When we first started this project, we went to the Hayes Museum and started wading through photographs there. And we found a whole series of postcard type photographs that happened to be taken by this gentleman, Ernst Niebergall. He came from Cologne, Germany. He was born in Cologne, Germany, and he came to the United States, settled in Sandusky in 1908. And for the next 40 plus years, he recorded through photographs the history of our area. I think he's one of the most important historians we have because he gives true life photographs of people, of nature, of wildlife, of transportation. He was truly a unique man. He had a terrific eye for photography. He earned his living by taking photographs, putting them on postcards, and selling them. One of the interesting stories about him is that during World War I, his cameras were confiscated by the federal government because he was a native of Germany, and they were kept in the government's possession until the war was over. And again, that happened to him during World War II. His cameras were confiscated again because he never became a citizen of the United States. He retains his German heritage. If you like go to antique stores or look through books, you'll see a lot of photographs with the little white descriptions on the bottom, and those are mostly Mr. Niebergall's photographs. And he did a fabulous job of photographing slices of life. Here's one of Rye Beach Park, and men having a drink while they're enjoying the summer. Rye Beach, and here's a beach scene that he took. It's a common picture. We've all seen it, but you know, it's his and his alone. The Trout Club in Castalia, exclusive club still in existence today. This was taken decades ago. Here's another Rye Beach party. Women in the water. And he would take these photographs and he would sell them to the families. He would put them on on postcard stands for people to buy. And this is how he made his living. Here's Ruggles Beach in Huron. Great photo. Minnewanka. And if you travel Route 6, you see a lot of these these little beach towns or little settlements that were really started as religious communities when they first came into existence. This one is Minnewanka. Doesn't look anything like that anymore, but that's what it was back in the day. Okay. It was, as we took our journey through the history of travel and tourism in Erie County, one of the things we found was that it was extremely difficult to find contemporary photographs. And mostly it's because none of us are ready to give up our photographs. So they're still in boxes and still on shelves and stored away until no one else wants them. This is a dear friend of mine. Her name is Sheila Earhart. Her family, her mother and father were carnies at Cedar Point. This is a photograph of her when she was 4 years old. She grew up at Cedar Point. Her parents had all kinds of concession stands there. They ran concession stands for years and years and years. And she has great stories about the park. And the one that I love the most was when the ferries started returning to Cedar Point after the war. They brought with them helium balloons. The kids had never seen helium balloons before, but the concessionaires would take the helium balloons and sell them to the kids. It was just such a shocking change to a new aspect of the way of life. Okay, here's one of my favorite stories. This is a photograph of Pat Daly. We all know who Pat Daly is. We thought he would be an important part of the current history of the shores and islands because he really put Put-in-Bay on the map. It took from the start of researching the book till like 2 days before we published this. We sent it off to the publisher. It took that long to find an adequate photograph of him to put in the publication. Again, it's one of those situations where no one is ready to give up photographs. His publicist couldn't even provide us with the photograph that we thought we would use for the book. We finally, after about 6 tries, I finally found an amateur photographer who was doing work for the Visitor and Convention Bureau, and he had some photographs and he provided us with one. But it was a lot of work just to get one picture of this one individual. As you travel along the shoreline, there's a lot of old memories of things that were and some things that are still there. Obviously, this is McGarvey's restaurant on the Vermilion River. It was always a popular restaurant. Eddie Solomon was the entrepreneur. He had a personality, strong personality, all of his own. And he was as much a part of the attraction as the food itself. If you traveled along Route 6 back in the 50s, you would have seen these wine casks. And an entrepreneur took these casks from some of the wineries and converted them into little cottages for people to stay in. I think there was a set also on Put-in Bay, if I'm not wrong. These were in Vermilion. Cheesehaven. The Cheesehaven has been in existence since 1949. It's just like a staple of the Ottawa County area. Everyone sees the signs, it's gaudy, it's great. My brother, this is a photograph that includes my brother and sister-in-law, and every time they come to visit us here in Sandusky, one of the places they have to go is to Cheesehaven. And it's always just so amusing to go there. It's also part of a history of entrepreneurship that we see here in Erie and Ottawa County. There are great individuals throughout the area who took advantage of tourism and translated it into a way of life for themselves and their family and future generations. This is another photograph of the cannon on Put-in Bay. It's kind of like a private joke for John and I. Those are our twin boys, Mike and Tom. And those are my brother's daughters, and Camille and Stacy. We took them on, when they came out to visit, it was a Cedar Point trip, it was a Cheesehaven trip, it was a trip to Put-in Bay. And this is one of the photographs that we captured of the kids. Again, it's not stored anyplace except in our homes.
As Marie mentioned, we looked at a lot of pictures while we worked on the book, and people would often ask us, "What's your favorite?" And this was my favorite. It was actually, we found it in the collection of the Maritime Museum in Sandusky. But to me, it says peace, tranquility, the beauty of the lake, relaxation. It's got a kind of poetic feel to it, and it's even got that trace of smoke on the horizon from a Lake Erie steamer. And this was mine. And this is Marie's.
This is, I don't know if you remember the old times on the Frontier Trail. They had all kinds of craftsmen there. This was Granny, and she took dog hair and wove it into yarn. It just brings back fond memories to me. It reminds me of simpler times and, a time of innocence to a degree. I just love the photograph. I thought she added so much to the park, and whenever I went to the park, I stopped to see her. The Lake Erie Shores and Islands book is on sale in several different locations. You can buy it apparently at Lakeside now, or soon to be at Lakeside. The book's $1 million. It's at Barnes & Noble in Crocker Park. Amazon obviously sells it. You can go directly to the publisher, Arcadia Publishing, and buy it through them. There are a couple of gift shops around the area that have started carrying the images of American books that are part of all of our heritage.
I published a memoir 2 years ago, my 40 years of wandering the midways in Cedar Point. And it's a memoir, not a history, but there's a lot of history in the memoir. And I think, again, this book's available at Amazon and other locations in the area. And if you're interested in the Corkscrew campaign or how Gemini got its name and lots of behind the scenes inside baseball about Cedar Point and amusement parks, this book's for you. Two I wanted to mention in particular, on the right is Cedar Point, the Queen of American Watering Places, written by David Francis and his wife Diane. They've gone through 3 editions. This is the most current one. I think it was published about 10 years ago. But it's mostly pictures, but the copy and the story are remarkable. David was a professional historian in addition to being an advertising guy, and did a marvelous job doing the research. It's sort of the gold standard for the narrative story, I guess you'd say, of Cedar Point. On your left is a book called Rolling Through the Years, Cedar Point Timeline and Chronology. And this is a brand new book by an amazing guy named Ken Miller, part-time worker at Cedar Point, who's devoted the last 7 to 8 years to writing this book. It's a coffee table book. I mean, a real coffee table book. It probably weighs a pound or more. It includes 1,700 different photo illustrations and prints and engravings and what have you. It has more facts about Cedar Point than I thought existed. It takes every year of the park's existence, what was new, what was retired, what the prices were, what celebrities were there, everything. And he's also set it up thematically as well. So there's a section on all the roller coasters, from the first one to the last one, every lake steamer. I mean, it's a marvelous compendium of information, and beautifully shown too, with photography and maps and what have you. It's a real treat. I know it's available at Cedar Point, it's available online, just through Amazon. And I think people would really enjoy it if you have more interest in specifically Cedar Point. So thank you from us for the time you spent with us this morning. We certainly enjoyed it. Tomorrow we're going to speak again, or at least I am, on Cedar Point in particular over the last 150 years. But we thought giving this background on the whole tourism in the region would be a good way to kind of dovetail the two together. And I hope you'll join us tomorrow and talk about roller coasters and the history of Cedar Point.
Stay safe and wear your masks.
Right. We'll be happy to answer any questions we can.
So we did have a couple questions come in. If you want to stop screen share now, and then I'll ask you a few of those and see if any more come in while we've started the Q&A. But I will say too, actually the new manager of the Lakeside Heritage Society just tuned in not too long ago and reminded me that we do have the Lake Erie Shores and Islands book in the Heritage Hall Museum. So we do have a couple of those copies there that I think we purchased from you all pretty early on. So those at least are available now, and then I'm going to be working with the fine print today to get some of those in here at Lakeside. But we had a good question that came in pretty early. Before the Jet Express, did boats on the lake take people to just one location, or did they make continuous stops at Cedar Point and the islands and the peninsula like they do today?
Good question. I think generally speaking, they did a circuit. You could leave Detroit in the morning and I would get to Whitten Bay or Middle Bass at a certain time. Then I would go to Sandusky or Lakeside and then back again. Or go from Cleveland to Sandusky to Toledo. They're mainly were circular routes with a lot of multi-stops. Yeah, currently, the good time does more of that excursion type boat ship, excursion type experiences now. But that pretty much they went all over.
And then the next question that came in with your chapters that you were reviewing, someone asked, it seems like tourism in the lake spiked in the 1950s or around that area. Is there a reason for that?
Transportation.
Yeah.
Transportation.
And, I would say transportation and marketing. You know, those had huge impacts. More leisure time. Middle America had more money to spend to treat their families to vacations.
And Cedar Point revitalized in the 1960s. It went from not much at all, in fact, in danger of closing and being turned into a state park, to becoming an attraction that drew 2 million people by the mid 60s. And that made a difference. So those folks, you know, spent more time here. They did other things as well. They went to Cheese Haven, they went to Cedar Point, they camped, they went fishing. Everyone benefited from that.
So the next one, the gentleman from Put-in-Bay, you had difficulty obtaining a photo of. What was his significance to Put-in-Bay?
He was an artist, a vocalist who sang songs about Put-in-Bay. He put Put-in-Bay on the map. People went to the bars at Put-in-Bay and just to hear Pat Daly sing. And he always linked Put-in-Bay with Key West. It was just, I guess, our generation back in the 70s, all knew who Pat Daly was. We'd all heard of him. He did live performance. He even performed at the State Theater every year for a number of years. And it was a sellout crowd every time he was there.
You think it would be easy to get a picture of him?
You would think so, someone like that. So we had another one come in and they're asking, I wonder if you have any information about the 103rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Civil War period campground and now small residential community in Sheffield Lake. It started as a reunion site for veterans.
Actually, I've been there. One of my former colleagues at Cedar Point is a descendant of one of the guys who served with that unit. And we had I belonged to the Civil War Roundtable in Lorraine County. We had a meeting there. It's still in existence, and their organization is still very solid as far as I know.
Well, that's great. Did the original founders of Put-in-Bay build it and expect it to be a, quote, party spot that it is today? And what were the original intentions with the island?
Good question. And these things are evolutionary, of course, but you know, when it first got cranking in the 1860s, 1870s, it was more of a high-end place. Not the Hamptons, let's say, but or French Riviera, but in the Great Lakes world, it attracted a wealthier clientele and more sedate things. You know, they didn't. I don't think they partied all night like they do today. That's that sort of thing. It's the modern version. What you see over there now is certainly changed, you know, but it didn't start out that way.
Gotcha. That's a good question. We did have one, I guess it's more of a comment. Someone said, regarding the ships, was Put-in-Bay a main terminal point? The ships are in Cleveland and the East would let passengers off and they would transfer to ships headed to Detroit and north.
Right. Yeah, the Put-in-Bay and Middle Bass were like way stations, but they were primary destinations too, because they really attracted the most people. A lot of people would say take the Put-in-Bay from Detroit to get dropped off at Put-in-Bay and say by 10 in the morning and get picked up at 8 or 9 that evening to head back to Detroit. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the ship went into Sandusky or went some other place.
Mm-hmm. And this is just a personal comment, I guess, for me, but I thought it was really interesting having been at the Lakeside Heritage Society for a number of years before this position. The photo that you have of the hotel, yes. I don't know if there's any way that you could maybe screen share again to bring that back up. But I thought it was pretty interesting because sure. the picture shows something that we rarely get to see, and that's the 1879 addition to the hotel was a parallel addition. That was the servants' quarters. and it's no longer there, but we usually get a number of questions about that every year, and we don't have any photos in the archives that show that really well. So I thought that
So I
would
hit
be,
share screen.
yes, you want to hit share screen?
Okay. Now I gotta go to the, how do I get to the first one?
I would go.
Go through the whole thing. There's an easier way to do this, but
I should have asked you earlier. I just thought it was a really good one for people from Lakeside to be able to see.
I think you passed.
no, it's the second one.
I think, yeah, I think it was on one of the first few slides there, the big photo.
Oh,
Oh, there's one of them.
closing it on. There we go. Sorry about
That
that.
one. Oh, no, that's fine. What I think's correct, the long building behind, we don't really have any
Oh, you have it
photos
there?
of that. Yep, we can see that. We can see the photo now.
We're not getting her audio.
But that
I've got it
particular,
on that page, Dakota.
I'm sorry. This is the right page. I just wanted to take a look again at the photos, this photo in particular, because it's not one we normally see.
I've got it on the screen, Dakota. Right here.
Yes, I can see it now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
What to do.
Tell you.
Dakota, can you hear
I
me?
accidentally muted me.
No, I'm definitely not.
Don't do that. Let's go backwards.
I should be unmuted now. I think you accidentally muted me. Can you hear me now?
That's not being one.
I haven't made a look here. We seem to have lost the audio here.
Okay, can you still not hear me now? No. Well, for the sake of the program, I know that, oh, and now we're unmuted.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear
I
me?
can't hear you.
Okay. I think it might be what was,
How about now?
no, I think it's what's happening at the start of the program. So I'm going
I have the
to,
image on the screen, but
I'm going to end the program. So I'll remind everyone else, hopefully everyone else can hear me, that we'll be seeing them, at least John, again tomorrow morning at 10:30 for a program about Cedar Point. We'll get our audio fixed before then. But thank you all for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you all again tomorrow.